What would you do if, on the night of your 75th birthday, your own child handed you a one-way ticket to a place you never agreed to go? I froze when I saw the papers laid out beside my slice of cake. A contract. A signature line. My name printed in bold letters. Next to it sat a pen I hadn't touched. My daughter, Rachel, leaned forward with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Dad, it's all arranged. You don't need to worry anymore. He was the ultation the tenu. Worry? The only thing clawing at my chest was the realization that this was no gift. It was a sentence. Her husband, Daniel, was already wheeling my suitcase toward the door. I hadn't packed it. I hadn't even known it was there. Yet my clothes, my shoes, even my shaving kit had been stuffed inside without me. Where exactly are we going? I asked, though the crack in my voice betrayed the storm in my gut. Rachel placed her hand gently on my arm. The same hand that once clung to me as a little girl in crowded stores. It's called Green Valley. A beautiful community. You'll be looked after. He had fall the most proud. Green Valley. I'd heard of it. Not from brochures or advertisements, but from whispered conversations in grocery aisles. Stories of children tucking away their parents like old coats, too heavy for spring. I looked around the dining room, the roast cooling on the table. Anna's crystal glasses shining in the light. The photographs of family vacations that once meant everything to us. All of it seemed to blur, as if I were already being erased. Daniel's voice cut sharp across the silence. Come on, Frank. They're expecting you tonight. And whined in Tanshire. Frank. Not Dad. Not Father. Just Frank. And in that instant, surrounded by the scent of a meal no one would eat, and the echo of love that no longer lived here, I understood the truth. My birthday wasn't a celebration. It was a betrayal. I still remember when this house sounded different, before it became silent walls and unanswered questions. It rang with laughter, clinking glasses, the shuffle of little feet chasing each other down the hallway. Back then, Rachel's voice was full of light. Not calculation. Back then, I had Anna beside me. Anna. Even now, her name feels like a prayer I whisper to steady myself. She loved this place more than anything. She picked the wallpaper in the dining room, floral and dated, but she said it made her feel like spring lived here forever. She baked on Sundays. The smell of cinnamon rolls floating out the kitchen window so strong, the neighbors joked they set their clocks by it. And she insisted that every holiday, no matter how small, deserved celebration. Life isn't measured by the big moments, Frank, she would tell me. It's in the small ones we string together that a family finds its story. See there, I see her in every corner. The rocking chair by the window where she nursed Rachel as a baby. The garden patch where she grew roses, even when her back ached from bending. The piano that never stayed perfectly tuned, but she played anyway. Her soft voice carrying hymns into the night. The memories come sharper now, as if they're fighting against the shadows Rachel and Daniel have thrown across them. I can still see Rachel as a girl, curled in my lap, begging me to tell her just one more story about knights and castles. She would giggle when I slipped her name into the tales, making her the brave princess who saved everyone. She believed me then. She believed her father was strong, unshakable, her protector. And when Anna grew sick, it was Rachel who helped me bring tea to her bedside. Rachel, who whispered to her mother that she'd take care of me when she was gone. I believed her. I clung to that promise like it was a lifeline while I held Anna's frail hand during those endless hospital nights. The last morning of Anna's life, she squeezed my fingers and whispered, "Don't let them forget who you are, Frank. Don't let them forget the love that built this family." Her words carved themselves into me. I thought Rachel heard them too. I thought she carried the same vow. For years after Anna passed, I tried to keep those promises alive. I cooked Sunday dinners. Even when the table grew emptier, I kept the roses blooming. Even when my knees complained, I saved Rachel's favorite china cups, ready for the day she might come over and sip tea like her mother did. I believed the roots of family ran too deep to be torn out by time. But as I sit here, replaying the warmth of those years, I realize those roots were mine alone. Maybe Anna was the glue, the gentle force that kept us bound. Without her, perhaps the love we shared became negotiable, replaceable. Still, when I close my eyes, I can almost hear Anna humming in the kitchen, the clatter of her spoon against the mixing bowl. I can see her smile across the table, eyes twinkling as she watched Rachel blow out her birthday candles. And I wonder if she were here now. What would she say seeing our daughter pack her father away like unwanted furniture? The past feels so close I could touch it. And yet, as I open my eyes, I am staring at a suitcase that doesn't belong to me, at a daughter I barely recognize. The contrast slices deeper than any knife. The first cracks did not arrive as thunder. They came quiet, like hairlines in glass. You only notice when the light hits wrong. Last fall, Rachel began using a new voice with me. Bright, careful, the way nurses talk to patients who ask the same thing twice. Dad, the stove, she said one Sunday, walking in without knocking. You left the burner on. Has it heaven day? I turned it to low. I answered. I'm making chowder. Has it heaven day? She smiled a little too wide. Right. Of course. Maybe we should look at induction. Safer. Has it heaven day? Safer became the soundtrack of that season. Safer knives. Safer stairs. Safer rugs with grip. Daniel followed with solutions I never asked for and invoices I never approved. A handyman I had never met installed rails along the hallway. The railing wobbled under my hand, as if it also doubted why it was there. 2 weeks later, my favorite fountain pen went missing. Anna had given it to me on our 30th anniversary. I searched the desk, the bedside table, the kitchen drawer where rubber bands and batteries go to be forgotten. Nothing. When I asked Rachel, she tilted her head as if I were speaking from underwater. You misplaced it. Dad. It happens. Frenda. Small things kept shifting. The family calendar replaced with a whiteboard featuring lists I did not write. A pill organizer that clicked at me if I reached for the wrong slot. A new doorbell camera that notified Daniel whenever anyone stood on my porch, including me. Tech helps, he said, showing me the app. Makes life easier. Frenda. Easier for whom? I asked. He laughed. For everyone. My Bruckenjunner. Winter crept in. Thin and gray. Rachel began bringing groceries I did not like and throwing out the ones I bought. These cereals are too sugary, she said, sliding my favorites into a trash bag. High blood pressure. Remember? I do not have high blood pressure. I told her so twice. She patted my shoulder. Sure. Dad. The box still went into the bag. One afternoon she arrived with a folder and a gentle, practiced tone. The bank suggested we streamline some accounts. Fewer logins. Less stress. Automatic payments, so you never worry. She placed a stack of forms in front of me. Sticky flags marking where to sign. I read the first page and felt heat rise behind my eyes. A consolidated signature authority. Rachel listed as co-owner. Daniel as emergency contact. The words looked tidy and almost kind. On the third page, a checkbox had already been ticked. I'll think about it, I said. Of course, she answered. But her smile flickered. It's just smart planning. Daniel looked up from his phone. The sooner we align things, the better. Align. As if my life were a crooked picture frame they had the right to straighten. I tried to push back gently. Take the whiteboard down, I said one day. Please. The calendar is fine. Rachel hesitated, then took a photo of the calendar with her phone. We'll keep both, she decided, already erasing my notes to rewrite them in her own handwriting. In January, Daniel insisted on driving me to a doctor's appointment I never scheduled. The physician, a man younger than my suits, asked me to draw a clock and remember 3 words. Daisy, train, blue. I remembered 4. He smiled politely, then signed something I could not see. On the way home, Daniel said, nothing to worry about. Just establishing a baseline. The word baseline sounded like the edge of a cliff. That evening, the garage opener refused to work with my clicker. Daniel had updated the system, and somehow only his code would open the door. Text me if you need to get in, he said. Simplifies things. I stood in the driveway and thought about simplicity as a polite word for control. The grandchildren watched me more than they used to. Not with curiosity, but with instruction. Grandpa, Mom says you should sit. Little Sophie would say whenever I carried books. She is 6. She watches my feet on the stairs like I might shatter. I began moving more carefully, not because I felt fragile, but because I was tired of making everyone else nervous. Then came the afternoon I will not forget. I returned from the hardware store to find the living room rearranged. Anna's piano pushed against the back wall. Half the framed photographs removed from the shelves. The cedar chest open. Rachel stood over it with a stack of old letters in her hands. Anna's voice on paper. These should be archived, she said. I know someone who digitizes. She spoke like a curator. I reached for the letters and she stepped back. They're safer with me. However, I looked at my daughter, my own blood, and searched for the girl who once fell asleep against my shoulder during thunderstorms. All I found was efficiency, a calendar invitation, a plan. I did not know that the plan already had a name and a move-in date. I only knew the house felt colder that evening, like winter had finally figured out a way inside. The day everything cracked wide open did not arrive with shouting or slammed doors. It came with a cake and candles. My 75th birthday. I had spent the morning polishing Anna's silverware, laying the table as she used to. A roast slowly filling the house with the smell of thyme and garlic. I even set 3 places, foolishly hoping Rachel, Daniel, and the children would stay long enough for dinner. When the doorbell rang, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe tonight we would eat together. Maybe I had been too suspicious, too ungrateful. But what greeted me was not warmth. It was a performance. Happy birthday, Dad! Rachel's voice carried a brightness, so rehearsed it almost hurt. Behind her, Daniel clutched a box wrapped in shiny blue paper. The children trailed in, whispering to each other, their eyes darting toward the corner where my suitcase, stuffed and zipped, waited like a coffin I had not built. I frowned. What's all this? Rachel kissed my cheek. Perfunctory. Quick. We have a surprise for you. Well, the surprise was not the cake. Not the clumsy card signed by the children. It was the folder Daniel placed beside my plate. Thick. Blue. Heavy with papers. My name appeared on the top sheet. Application for residential care admission. The roast hissed in the oven. Forgotten. My fork slipped from my hand. What is this supposed to mean? Rachel's smile twitched. Dad, you'll love it. It's safer. You'll have people around you all the time. No more loneliness. Friend ride, Daniel added. We already put down the deposit. Move in is this week. Friend ride. The words crashed over me like ice water. Move in, yes. Dad. Rachel's voice cracked. Then stiffened. We've been talking to professionals. You need more care than we can give. Friend ride. I stared at the papers. A power of attorney form already bore a signature that looked like mine but felt like a stranger's. My stomach tightened. I never signed this. Friend Reevely will tend. Oath. Rachel's hand fluttered toward mine. You must have forgotten. That's why this is best. And state, forgotten. The word hit like a slap. Forgotten like Anna's china, now stacked behind cardboard boxes in the garage. Forgotten like the promises Rachel once whispered into her mother's frail hands. I pushed back my chair. The sound scraped across the floor. Sharp and final. You can't do this. And state, Daniel's tone shifted. Firm. Almost businesslike. Frank. It's done. The van's outside. They're expecting you tonight. And state, the children stared at the floor. Silent. The roast burned behind me. Smoke curling into the air. Anna's crystal glasses caught the light one last time, glittering as though they knew they were about to be packed away with everything else. I looked at Rachel, my little girl who once begged me to protect her from monsters under the bed. And now she was the one pushing me into a place I had never chosen, erasing me with every polite word. And in that moment, as Daniel lifted my suitcase and Rachel urged me toward the door, I understood. This wasn't a gift. It was an exile. The ride that night felt endless, though the town where they drove me was only 30 miles away. I sat in the back seat of Daniel's SUV, my suitcase wedged beside me like a silent judge. The smell of smoke from my ruined roast clung to my shirt. A reminder of the dinner that never happened. Rachel kept glancing back in the mirror, her smile brittle, her eyes fixed anywhere but on mine. The children whispered, their faces glowing blue in the light of a tablet. Not one of them asked where we were going. Maybe they already knew. Maybe they had been told Grandpa was moving to a place with games and nurses and bright gardens. A story wrapped in ribbons to make betrayal look like kindness. I turned my head to the window, watching landmarks slide past. The gas station where Rachel once begged me for candy. The park where she learned to ride her bike. Each place felt like a farewell I hadn't chosen. The lump in my throat burned hotter with every mile. Finally, the building came into view. White stone, long windows, hedges trimmed too perfectly. The sign read, Willow Pines Senior Living. My heart slammed against my ribs. This wasn't a visit. It was a burial in slow motion. Daniel pulled under the awning. Rachel turned, her voice trembling but determined. Dad, this is your new home. Everything is ready for you. A grace. The words snapped something inside me. New home. My old home, Anna's home, was still warm with the scent of the meal I had made for them. The table was set with her china. The photographs still lined the shelves. But I was never meant to see them again. I tried to step out of the car, but my knees shook so badly I had to grip the door. Rachel caught my arm. Don't make this harder, she whispered, as if my pain were an inconvenience. Inside, the lobby smelled of disinfectant and lemon polish. A receptionist looked up, her smile flat, rehearsed. Daniel rolled my suitcase across the tiles, the wheels squealing. This is Frank Miller, he said, as if delivering a package. Admission should be ready. Well, a woman in scrubs appeared, clipboard in hand. Room 214. Second floor. We've been expecting you. Well, expecting me. I felt hollow, like I had been cut out of my own life. My chest ached so sharply I thought I might collapse. Anna's voice echoed in memory. Don't let them forget who you are, Frank. But how could I hold on when my own daughter signed me away? Rachel kissed my cheek quickly. We'll visit soon, she said, her eyes already shifting to the door. Daniel shook my hand like we were finishing a business deal. Then they were gone. No hesitation. No backward glance. Their relief was almost visible. Like a weight lifted, now that I was out of sight. I stood in the middle of the lobby, suitcase by my feet, watching the glass doors close behind them. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly abandoned, not by strangers, not by fate, but by the very people I had loved and raised. The silence pressed against me until it was hard to breathe. The world I knew was gone. What remained was only betrayal, heavy and suffocating, settling in my chest like stone. Morning at Willow Pines felt artificial, like someone turned the sky up to make the place kinder. A nurse named Ava knocked and set down oatmeal and tea I did not ask for. She called me Mr. Miller in a careful voice. I thanked her and waited for the door to close. Then I opened the suitcase Daniel packed for me. Inside were shirts I had donated years ago, socks without pairs, and a shaving kit missing the razor I use every day. Nothing that mattered was there. Not the watch Anna gave me when our daughter was born. Not the photo of us on the Cape. Not the blue fountain pen she chose for our 30th anniversary. At the bottom, tucked beneath a frayed sweater, lay a thin folder. It held a brochure for Willow Pines. A move-in checklist with my name at the top. And a photocopy titled Durable Power of Attorney. The signature at the bottom looked like mine, until you saw the hesitation in the F, and the way the R curled wrong, as if the hand had practiced but never lived inside my name. On the back, a sticky note in Rachel's handwriting read, Originals in kitchen file. Bring to intake. Ava returned to collect the tray. Her eyes flicked to the folder before she arranged her face into kindness. She hesitated at the door. Your daughter said you like to wander, she said softly. We will keep your room key at the desk for now. My throat tightened. I do not wander. I wanted to say. I did not trust my voice. After she left, I pulled out my phone. New emails waited like lit fuses. Password changed confirmations for 2 accounts I did not touch. A message from my bank asking me to verify a request to add an authorized user named Rachel Pierce. A voicemail from a realtor whose name I did not recognize. Bright with congratulations about a pre-market listing and staging set for Friday. I called back. This is Frank Miller. You left a message. The woman's tone shifted at once. Mr. Miller. Hello. Rachel told me you preferred not to handle details yourself. We have an offer strategy. A professional team will hold an estate sale on Saturday to clear non-essentials. Photography on Sunday. We can hit the market next week. Anestate sale. My hand shook. Who authorized that? Your daughter. Sir. She said you were transitioning to full-time care and wanted a clean timeline. A pause opened between us. Sir, are you still there? I ended the call and dialed my neighbor. Alma Alvarez answered on the second ring. Frank, are you all right? I saw trucks yesterday. Men carried boxes from your garage. They said your daughter hired them. There is a sign in your yard. Coming soon. It says, people were walking your garden, measuring the patio. The oatmeal turned to paste in my mouth. Alma, could you take a photo of the sign and send it to me? A text arrived moments later. My porch, my flowers, my home, and in the corner of the picture, Rachel's car. I went downstairs to the front desk and asked to review my admission file. The clerk, a man named Collins with a ring of keys that sounded like wind chimes, gave the practiced answer about privacy protocols. Then he looked at the clock and lowered his voice. If you sit by the window, I can leave the folder while I fetch copies of your schedule. He disappeared. The folder stayed. I opened it fast, as if truth might run. Inside were scanned forms with signatures that were not mine. A physician's statement signed by a doctor I had never met, describing incidents that never happened. Wandering at night, leaving doors unlocked, Confusion while driving. At the back sat a page I did not expect. A mail forwarding order to a box near Daniel's office. Effective immediately. I took photos of every page. Collins returned with a smile that almost looked like apology. He slid the folder back and tapped the desk once. A quiet signal I might have imagined. By afternoon, my phone buzzed with another email. Utilities transfer request received. It read, effective date next Monday. I checked the doorbell camera app and could not log in. Ownership had changed. A short message appeared. Access revoked by administrator. The world I built was being reassigned in neat digital steps, each one dressed as efficiency. I understood the shape of the plan now. First, make me seem fragile. Next, collect papers that translate suspicion into authority. Then move money. Forward mail. Cancel access. And replace keys. Finally, sell the house. Empty the rooms. Sweep me into a place with lemon polish. Close the door. And call it love. I sat on the edge of the narrow bed in room 214 and pressed my palms together to stop the shaking. There is a flavor of grief that arrives when the person harming you knows exactly where your tender places are. It is a knowledge only family possesses. They do not need to break down the door. They already have the key. I looked at the window and said Anna's words out loud. Do not let them forget who you are. I wrote 3 lines in my notebook in block letters so large my hand ached. Call the bank. Call an attorney. Call the truth by its name. That night I did not sleep. The halls of Willow Pines were quiet, broken only by the squeak of shoes on linoleum and the distant rattle of carts. I lay in the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. Anna's words circling in my head like a prayer and a warning. Don't let them forget who you are. I rose before dawn, dressed in the wrinkled clothes Daniel packed, and sat at the desk with the notebook I had salvaged from the suitcase. My hands trembled, but my mind was sharp. I listed everything I knew. The forged signature, the fake doctor's report, the bank account changes, the realtor's calls, Alma's photograph of the sign in my yard. Each detail felt like a nail hammered into the coffin Rachel and Daniel had built for me. But I also knew nails could be pried back out. At breakfast, I chose a seat near the staff station. I listened. An orderly complained that overtime hours hadn't been paid. A nurse muttered that supplies were running thin. The receptionist mentioned cuts to activity budgets. I recognized the signs. Willow Pines was stretched too thin. Desperate to keep up appearances. Desperation made people careless. Carelessness left doors open. After the meal, I walked the corridors slowly, counting steps, noting cameras, studying the rhythm of the staff. My engineer's eye cataloged everything. Which doors had keypad locks? Which were propped open? Which staffers lingered too long on their phones? By mid-morning, I knew the pattern well enough to slip into the small library unobserved. The library smelled of dust and disuse, but it had one treasure. I logged in with the generic guest account and opened the email application. I typed a message to Alma, attaching the photos I had taken of the forged papers. Then I sent another to my old friend Thomas Reed, a retired attorney who had once helped me settle a boundary dispute. I prayed he still checked his inbox. When I returned to my room, a folded note waited on the pillow. No envelope, no signature. 3 words in hurried handwriting. I believe you. My heart pounded. Someone inside Willow Pines had seen more than they were supposed to. Someone wanted me to know I wasn't crazy. Wasn't alone. That evening, Rachel called. Her voice dripped with false warmth. Dad, how are you settling in? The kids miss you. We can. I bit down on the anger clawing at my throat. I know about the realtor. I know about the forged papers. We can. Silence. Then a sigh. You're confused again. Please. Don't make this harder. We can. I pressed harder. You sold me off like old furniture. But you forgot one thing. I am not finished. We can. Before she could reply, I ended the call. For the first time since the nightmare began, I felt something stir in my chest that was not grief or fear. It was resolve. That night, under the hum of fluorescent lights, I made my plan. I would gather proof. I would find allies. And when the time came, I would remind my daughter and her husband that the man they tried to erase still had a voice and 75 years of fight left in him. By sunrise, I had a plan and 3 numbers on a notepad. First, the bank. I reached the fraud desk and told them, clear and slow, that any change adding Rachel Pierce to my accounts was disputed. The agent listened, then said, Mr. Miller, I've locked new transfers and set in-person verification only. Temporary codes will go to this phone. Share them with no one. The rad with friend from the way. Next, the realtor. She answered bright and fast. I kept my tone even. Cancel the listing. Remove the sign. You do not have my consent. A pause. Then a careful reply. Understood. Sir. A giant. Then I called Thomas Reed. He answered on the second ring. Frank. Tell me everything. I told him about the forged papers, the fake doctor, the intake forms. He did not waste words. You are competent, and they know it. We will file a revocation today, report fraud to the bank, and seek an injunction to stop any sale. I'm coming with a mobile notary. A giant, a soft knock. Ava set down breakfast and closed the door. I'm the one who left the note, she whispered. I believe you. Her eyes flashed. Admissions rushed your file. Collins says the dates don't match. The fax header on the doctor's letter is wrong. Be careful at the desk. One-sided. Why help me? I asked. My father, she said. He died in a place that stopped seeing him. I promised I would not let that happen again. One-sided. Minutes later, the phone rang. Collins from the front desk. If you wish to review your welcome packet, I could leave it by the window, he said. 10 minutes after that, I sat in the sunny corner with the folder open. I scanned each page with my phone. The signature that looked like mine but wasn't. A physician's statement with a fax number that, on a quick search, belonged to a mail store. A mail forwarding order to a box near Daniel's office. A consent form with boxes already checked. I forwarded the files to Thomas and to Alma. Then I did something Rachel would not expect. I sent everything to my grandson, Eli. A quiet kid who understands computers. I'm with you, Grandpa, he wrote. Mom doesn't know I have a second email. Tell me what you need. It is not complace. Start with screenshots. I wrote back. Backups. Save everything, he answered. I'll check Mom's shared drives. She reuses passwords. It is not complace. Before noon, the long-term care ombudsman arrived. I'm Ms. Not Turner, she said. Staff said you asked for an advocate. I laid out the timeline and showed her the images. She nodded. You did the right thing. I'm opening a case. I will interview admissions and request security footage for your intake. And add Shaw. Thomas appeared that afternoon with a silver-haired notary and a stack of papers. We will execute 3 documents, he said. A sworn declaration about the forgeries. A revocation of any power of attorney naming Rachel or Daniel. And a designation of me as your temporary agent for legal and financial protection. And add Shaw. The notary asked me to read a paragraph aloud. Then the date. The city. The president's name. I answered without hesitation. My hands were steady when I signed. She sealed each page. Thomas lowered his voice. I filed a report with Adult Protective Services for suspected financial exploitation. They will coordinate with the ombudsman and the police. Do you consent? I nodded. Ava slipped in with water. Thomas introduced himself. She glanced at the documents. There's a camera over admissions, she said. And Collins prints a sign in sheet with timestamps. A shadow filled the doorway. Collins cleared his throat. I don't know what you're talking about, he said to the air, and placed a plain envelope on the dresser before leaving. Inside were 2 items. The log for the day I arrived, with Rachel's signature at 6:42 p.m., and a receipt not from a clinic but from an online template vendor. The same fax number appeared at the top. Thomas photographed each page. Chain of custody, he said. The detective will want originals. They're rezealot. Near evening, the bank called back. Mr. Miller, we reversed the user additions and reissued your cards. A manager will visit tomorrow for verification. Any property transaction now requires a notarized authorization by you. Only you. They're rezealot. Relief hit so hard I had to sit. I pictured Rachel's checklists. Each neat box she ticked, while telling herself, this was love spoken in paperwork. I pictured my roses in the yard. Eli sent one more message before dinner. Found a draft email from Mom to a transition service. Dated 2 months ago. Subject timeline for Dad. Attachments show a budget and an inventory list. She wrote, after move day. Schedule deep clean and estate sale. I saved everything. Haven know then. I stared at the screen until my eyes stung. A heart can crack twice and still beat. I typed back, thank you. Kiddo. Keep it all. And remember I love you. Haven know then. When the dining room opened. Miss Turner met me at the door. Admissions is nervous, she said. Good. They will cooperate. I filed a preservation request for video. It is the setter. What happens next? I asked. We hold the line, she said. You have allies now. Paper. People. Process. It isn't loud, but it wins. It is no frontsif. That night I watched the last light fade behind the hedges. The room still smelled of lemon polish, but it no longer felt like a cell. It felt like a staging ground. I opened my notebook and wrote one more line. Tomorrow. Tell the truth where it cannot be ignored. Anna would have smiled at that. She believed in simple tools. A good pen. Clear words. Honest witnesses. I had all 3. I closed my eyes at last. The pen still warm in my hand. The police arrived on a Wednesday morning. A detective named Harris stepped into my room at Willow Pines, carrying a leather folder, and the kind of calm that made people confess before he even spoke. He introduced himself, shook my hand firmly, and sat across from me. Mr. Miller, I've reviewed the documents your attorney sent. I want you to walk me through everything in your own words. Dates. Conversations. Any details you remember. He had a divinantly small, so I did. I told him about the birthday dinner. The suitcase by the door. The folder with my forged signature. I told him about the phone call from the realtor. The email from the bank. The missing heirlooms. The day Rachel called and said it was all for my safety. My voice shook, but not from age. From anger. Harris listened without interrupting, jotting notes in clean, steady handwriting. When I finished, he nodded. We already executed a search warrant at your daughter's home. We recovered personal items, jewelry, and handwritten practice sheets of your signature. We also pulled transaction records showing payments to an online service that sells forged medical documents. It's strong evidence. Well, my heart clenched to hear it confirmed. To know this betrayal had paper trails and receipts made me feel both vindicated and gutted. By noon, Harris gathered staff in the conference room. Thomas sat beside me, Alma just behind, and Ava stood against the wall, arms folded. Harris laid the evidence out. Photographs, receipts, screenshots Eli had pulled, and Collins's time logs from the front desk. Every page painted the same truth. Rachel and Daniel hadn't stumbled into a mistake. They had engineered a scheme. The administrator of Willow Pines, Mr. Bennett, looked pale as he realized his facility had admitted me on fraudulent paperwork. Detective, we had no idea. Harris cut him short. Your intake staff failed to verify. That's under review. But the larger crime rests with the perpetrators. Elder fraud, forgery, attempted theft of assets. We're moving forward with charges. End. The words landed heavy in the room. I pictured Rachel's face. The way she once leaned against me in church pews. The way her hand slipped into mine during fireworks. Now those hands had drawn my name over and over until she could mimic me well enough to sell my life out from under me. That evening, news vans pulled into the Willow Pines parking lot. Reporters crowded by the hedges. Cameras pointed at the glass doors. The headlines scrolled across screens. Local couple, investigated for elder abuse and fraud. My name followed, along with my photograph from MedTech's early days. Pulled from archives I had almost forgotten. Residents gathered around the television in the lounge. Some gasped. Others shook their heads. A woman named Evelyn whispered, "That's your daughter?" I nodded once. My chest felt like stone. The next morning, Harris returned. "The grand jury will hear the case within weeks," he said. "In the meantime, we've issued restraining orders. Rachel and Daniel cannot access your accounts, your property, or this facility. You are safe here. That is engraved from this stain." Safe. The word had been twisted by my daughter until it meant prison. Hearing it in Harris's voice, tied to law and order, almost broke me. My throat tightened. After he left, Eli called. His voice cracked through the receiver. "Grandpa, I saw the news. I didn't know Mom and Dad planned this. I found their notes, the budgets, the emails. I gave everything to the detective. I'm so sorry." "Nowhere." Tears blurred the window in front of me. "It isn't your fault. Eli, you helped save me." "Nowhere." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Just the sound of his breathing and mine, heavy with everything unspoken. That night, as I sat at the desk, I realized the storm had shifted. The fear was still there, but it was joined by something larger. The truth was out in the open now. Undeniable. Rachel and Daniel would face the law. Not just my disappointment, and while justice would not stitch the family back together, it would at least stop the bleeding. I wrote one line in my notebook before turning out the light. Tomorrow belongs to the truth, not their lies. The morning of the hearing smelled like rain and old paper. Thomas met me at the entrance to the courthouse and offered his arm. Not because I needed it, but because he knew kindness steadies a man in ways medicine cannot. Inside, the hallway hummed with elevators and muted voices. Ava had pressed my only decent jacket before I left Willow Pines. Alma slipped a prayer card into my pocket when the car door closed. I felt their faith like a hand between my shoulder blades. Rachel and Daniel waited down the hall with their attorney. Rachel wore a tidy dress, the color of winter skies. Her hands shook as she smoothed the hem again and again. Daniel stared at a spot above my head with the fixed calm of a man who thinks if he shows no fear, the floor will not give way. When Rachel saw me, she took a single step forward and stopped, as if the air itself had become glass. Inside the courtroom, the judge read the charges in a voice that had done this 1,000 times. Forgery, fraud, attempted theft by deception, unlawful restraint under color of authority. Each word landed like a hammer. The prosecutor laid out the timeline with the discipline of a mapmaker. Birthday dinner. Suitcase by the door. Forged medical letter with a fake fax number. Mail forwarding orders. Utility transfers. Realtor emails. Screenshots in neat rows. Eli's name did not appear, but his work shone through every page that proved the truth. The defense tried to wrap the story in softer cloth. They spoke of safety and concern. They said adult children are overwhelmed and do their best. They said Rachel had watched me lose my keys and repeat myself, and that fear had guided her hand. The judge asked about the practice sheets of my signature. He asked about the purchase receipts from a document site. He asked why a healthy father had been moved on a weeknight with no notice and no physician who had ever met him. The gentle cloth unraveled in his questions until only the threadbare pattern of greed remained. Bail conditions were strict. Restraining orders extended. The judge forbade any sale or transfer related to my property and accounts. A preliminary hearing date was set. The gavel fell with a sound that ricocheted through my bones. It did not feel like victory. It felt like a door closing on a room where we once ate birthday cake and laughed without counting the knives. In the corridor, Rachel caught up to me. For a heartbeat, she looked like the child who used to fall asleep on my chest during thunderstorms. Her mouth trembled. Her voice was small. "Dad, please. If you speak to the prosecutor, if you ask them to be lenient, if you say you never wanted this." My name in her mouth had the pull of a tide. I pressed my palm against the wall to keep from falling into it. I wanted to reach for her. I wanted to say we would fix this quietly and go home and make coffee and pretend it had been a strange dream. But truth stood between us like a gate I had no right to ignore. I took a breath that felt like it belonged to a younger man. I said, "I love you. That love does not obligate me to lie. I will not ask the world to call this a misunderstanding. You chose a path that put me away and priced my life. Choices have weight." She flinched. Then anger burned through her tears. "We were trying to help you. You would not listen." Daniel finally found his voice. He said everyone knew I was slipping. He said a responsible son-in-law acts when an elder refuses care. He said the business depended on decisive action. That timing mattered. That the market was changing and houses do not sit forever. The words stacked like crates. Efficient and soulless. Thomas stepped between us and said, "We are done here." Outside, the sky opened in a hard rain. Reporters waited behind a chain of umbrellas. Microphones lifted like metal flowers. Questions flew. How did it feel to be betrayed by your own child? I wanted to say it felt like drowning in a familiar river. I kept walking. That evening the story ran on every local station. Willow Pines residents watched with me in the lounge. A caption under my photo called me a community benefactor. A caption under Rachel's called her a small business owner. Someone had filmed the coffee shop that afternoon. The line was gone. A handwritten sign on the door apologized for the sudden closure. The camera lingered on rows of empty mugs. A barista wiped a counter as if polishing memory into something that could be used again. Eli came after dinner. He stood in my doorway with a backpack and new shadows under his eyes. He said nothing at first. He put the backpack on the chair and sat on the edge of the bed, like a boy who had brought home a broken thing to the only person who knew how to fix it. I told him I was proud of his courage. He cried into his hands. He said he felt split down the middle. He said he loved his mother and he loved me. And that love felt like a rope pulled from both ends. I told him there is a third place to stand. It is called the truth. It will hold you when loyalty tears at you. He nodded. Not because the pain had eased, but because a name had been given to the ground under his feet. 2 days later, I returned to the house with Alma and a police escort to inventory what remained. The rooms smelled of lemons and dust. Blue painter's tape still marked places a stager had planned to soften. The piano was draped in a sterile throw. The cedar chest held air where letters had lived. In the bedroom, I opened the top dresser drawer and found the watch Anna gave me when Rachel was born. The strap was cracked. I held it against my heart and counted to 20 until the world stopped shimmering. In the kitchen, the pie pan with tiny roses sat where I had left it on the night of the cake. I washed it with careful hands. Water climbed the sides and fell in clear sheets as if the pan were breathing. When I stepped onto the back porch, the garden met me like a face I had not seen since a war. The roses had suffered. Weeds had taken the path, but a single bud pushed against a thorn. Stubborn and red. Alma touched my arm. She said, "This place is waiting for you." I said, "I do not know if I am ready to live here again." She said, "Readiness is a myth. You return and you begin. The rest follows." On Sunday, I baked a pie for the first time since the night they moved me. Flour dusted the counter like snow. Butter snapped under the knife. The oven warmed the house until the windows fogged and the old thermostat clicked like a throat clearing. I spoke into the quiet and told Anna I had done what I could. I told her I had not asked the court to punish our daughter, but to stop the harm. To draw a bright line where love had been used as a mask. The crust browned. The scent filled the rooms. I placed the pie on the rack and listened to it settle. Tiny sounds, like relieved breath. When I carried a still warm slice to Willow Pines for Ava and Collins that evening, we ate at the staff break table with paper forks and burn marks on our tongues. We laughed when the fillings slid and made stains that would never wash fully out. For a few minutes, the world was simply sweet and hot and human. Then the clock reminded us who we were again and where we needed to be. That night, I stood at the window of room 214 and watched the rain move across the hedges. The courthouse orders were ink on paper. The news cycle would tilt toward its next storm. But something irreversible had happened. A story that wanted to live in the shadows now lived in the light. Loss still pooled at my feet. But it no longer pulled me under. I was standing. I was breathing. I was telling the truth out loud where everyone could hear it. Spring came slowly that year. As if the world itself hesitated to turn the page. By then, Rachel and Daniel were under indictment. Their names repeated on evening broadcasts that once featured weather and school closings. I no longer flinched when I heard them. Their choices belonged to the courts now. What belonged to me was the fragile task of building a life out of what remained. Willow Pines felt different after the hearing. Residents who once looked at me as another discarded man began to stop by my table. Evelyn asked me to help her son write a letter contesting bank fees. Lionel wanted advice on repairing a broken radio. Even staff treated me with a kind of respect that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with the fact that I had fought back. I had become, against all odds, a symbol of sorts. But symbols cannot fill a house. The first time I returned home without police escort, I walked each room alone. The air carried dust, but also memory. The calendar on the kitchen wall still bore the date of my birthday. I touched it, then tore the page away. I opened the cedar chest and placed Anna's watch inside. Safe again. Slowly, I began returning things to their places. Photographs from evidence bags. Books from Alma's closet. The piano polished until it remembered it could sing. Eli came every weekend. He carried groceries. But more than that, he carried hope. One Saturday, he brought his laptop. "I applied for internships with nonprofits," he said. Cheeks flushed. "I want to understand how to protect people the way you protected yourself." His words cracked something deep inside me. I pressed his hand and said, "You will protect more than me. You will protect those who cannot find their voice." She lectioned. Not all moments were strong. Some nights I woke sweating, convinced I could hear Rachel's voice in the hallway calling me confused, fragile, incapable. On those nights, I would sit at the kitchen table, pie pan in front of me, writing notes to Anna as if she were across the room. The act of writing steadied me. The act of baking filled the house with her memory. But not in sorrow, more like an anchor. Neighbors began visiting again. Alma brought seedlings for the garden. A retired teacher down the street offered to play hymns on the piano with me. Slowly, laughter edged its way back through the windows. Yet the wound of Rachel's betrayal never fully closed. It pulsed whenever I heard a child call for a parent in the grocery store. It ached when I saw mothers brushing hair from their daughters' eyes. I learned to carry it the way one carries an old injury, aware of its limits. Grateful it had not destroyed the whole body. What surprised me most was how dignity returned, not in large gestures, but in ordinary rituals. Reading the paper with real ink smudging my hands. Planting roses where Anna once knelt. Sharing breakfast with Eli at the table that had nearly been sold away. Each act whispered, "You are still here." One evening, Eli looked up from his notes and asked, "Do you think you'll ever forgive Mom?"
Oh.
The question landed heavy, but I answered slowly. Forgiveness is not a door you open for the guilty. It is a window you open for yourself. I cannot open it yet, but I hope one day I will. Because Anna would want that. He nodded, tears in his eyes. For the first time in months, I felt the balance shift from survival to living. The past was scarred, yes, but the future still carried shape. And in the quiet of my rebuilt home, I realized I was not merely recovering, I was beginning again. A year after the courthouse rain, the house smelled like cinnamon and lemon oil again. I woke before dawn, rolled out a pie crust on the old table, and set a single candle beside the cooling rack. Today, the garden would host a picnic, not a sale. Alma arrived first with lilacs. Ava brought paper cups and the softest laugh I know. Collins carried chessboards for the guests from Willow Pines. Ailey came last, breathless from the bus, a stack of flyers in his hand. "We reached the goal," he said. "Every seat, every sponsor. To what?" He spread the flyers on the counter. Protecting elders, training advocates, emergency help when a signature becomes a weapon. At the bottom was a small line that made my chest tighten. Founded by Frank Miller and his grandson, Eli Pierce. "Your name belongs there," I said. "So does yours," he answered. And for a moment I saw the boy who used to balance on my feet as we waltzed in the kitchen. The boy who carried truth into a room where lies were stacked like boxes. Neighbors unfolded tables in the yard. Children chased each other under the maple. The roses, coaxed back by Alma's hands, threw scent into the warm air as if they had forgiven us all. I placed Anna's watch on the windowsill to catch the light. When the doorbell rang, I wiped flour from my palms and opened to a courier holding a plain envelope. No return address. Inside lay a letter written in my daughter's tidy script. "Dad," it began. "I am writing from a room with a window that faces a brick wall. The court allowed me to plead to lesser charges in exchange for restitution and service. Shame is an honest teacher. I read about the fund. I see your name. And I see the man I forgot to honor. If there is a corner of forgiveness, I will sit there quietly until you call my name. I am trying to be someone my son will not have to explain away. I am sorry." I sat at the kitchen table and let the words come apart inside me. The ache I had taught myself to carry grew sharp again, and then unexpectedly warm. Ava rested her hand on my shoulder when she saw my face. "You don't have to decide today," she said. "You can just let the light be light." Remendity. By noon, the yard filled. Residents from Willow Pines arrived in a small bus. Evelyn wore a new hat. Lionel rolled in a radio he had resurrected. It played Billie Holiday, like the world had never learned to be cruel. "Mr. Bennett, contrite and humbler, handed me a certificate naming me to a permanent community oversight panel. "We're not who we were," he said, "because you would not let us stay that way." In most of Maine, we ate pie on paper plates. Cinnamon stained our fingers. Eli introduced the fund from a lawn chair with a squeaky hinge and the confidence of a man finding his lane. "We will train advocates," he said. "We will show families what help looks like that does not steal anyone's name." People cheered. But a deeper sound moved under the noise relief. Recognition. The quiet music of people who see each other at last. When the speeches ended, I slipped inside and dialed a number I had practiced not to call. The line clicked. A recorded voice named the facility. And then my daughter's hello threaded the space between us. We spoke about ordinary things at first. The food, the schedule, the counselor who makes her write 3 truths and 1 wish every day. Then there was a silence we both deserved. "Dad," she said finally, "you once told me that love is a promise you practice when it is inconvenient." I broke it. If there is any way back, I will start from the very bottom. Well, town's the tane. I pressed my fingers to my eyes until stars appeared. "I can't make the past gentle," I said, "but I can refuse to let it be the only story." The quiet on her end trembled. "I don't know how to deserve that." "Well, town's the tane. You won't," I said. "None of us do. We just start." "Well, town's the tane." When I stepped back outside, Eli was helping Lionel set up chess pieces, dark and light in perfect rows. Ava was pouring lemonade. Alma tied ribbons to the fence where the realtor's sign once stood. I took a plate to the picnic table and watched sunlight turn the grass into 1,000 small mirrors. A breeze lifted the letter on the windowsill. I weighed it with Anna's watch and smiled at the small, stubborn beat that still lived under its glass. At dusk, the bus idled in the driveway. We hugged goodbye in the soft light that always made Anna reach for her camera. Before the doors closed, Evelyn pressed a folded napkin into my palm. Inside was a note written in looping hand. "Thank you for reminding me I am not a problem to be solved." I stood very still. My throat burned the way a man's throat burns when he knows he is alive. Later, when only dishes rattled and the house settled the way old houses do, Eli and I sat at the kitchen table with the last piece of pie. The candle by the window guttered and went out, smoke curling into the lemon-scented dark. "Grandpa," he said, "do you ever wish none of it had happened?" I looked at the empty plate, the garden, the ribboned fence, the worn watch face catching the last light. "Every day," I said. "And also no. Because what we built today grew out of what tried to break us." "What is this?" He nodded, leaned his head on my shoulder like a boy again. And I felt something open that grief had nailed shut. I did not know what Rachel's apology would become. I did not know how many board meetings or hospital visits or late-night calls the fund would demand. I only knew that the man my daughter tried to erase had chosen his ending. Not as a victim shuffled off stage, but as a witness who stayed and put his hand on the next person's back and said, "Keep walking. There is light ahead." I washed the last plate by hand and set it to dry on a towel embroidered with tiny roses. Outside, the porch swing creaked. The maple leaves whispered. In the living room, the piano waited. I pressed a single key and let it ring until it joined the silence. Anna would have smiled at that note clear. True. Ordinary as breath. I whispered thank you to the room that held our life. To the people who had become my scaffolding. To the daughter whose ruin had taught us all new language for repair. Then I turned on the porch light and left it burning, for whoever might need it next.